welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching Unbiased Magic Reviews, and today I've got a requested video for you guys. I was asked to put together a beginner's guide to mentalism. Now, I don't claim to be a professional mentalist, although I've studied mentalism for over 20 years. I actually have videos of me performing mentalism from 15 years ago, if you can imagine that. And I have the unfair advantage that I have strangers to perform mentalism for every single day at work. So I perform mentalism constantly. And because of that, over the years, I've created many mentalism effects of my own, some of which I've showed on this channel, and experimented a lot with things. And so I think I have a good foundation to help those people that are just starting out in mentalism, or if you are that magician that has a drawer full of peak wallets, but you don't use any of them, well, maybe this video will also help you. It's important for you to think about what your goals are when you get into mentalism, because mentalism is distinctly different from magic. Because when we perform magic, we're showing the spectator something impossible. Whereas when you perform mentalism, it's more on a personal level, because you're reading their mind, you're influencing them, you're predicting something that they're going to do before they do it. They're going to leave with the impression that that guy, he really understood me. That guy, he could tap into my mind. He knew that about me. And that's the reason why mentalism is so powerful. In some ways, much more powerful than just magic in general. And I think that that's what attracts a lot of people to learn mentalism. So I'm going to give you guys just some basic tips here, but I'm also going to go over what I consider to be the 5 pillars of basic mentalism tech, or basic mentalism technique. The 5 pillars, what I think that all beginners in mentalism should strive to master. And then if there is interest in this video, if I see that there's views on this video and comments, I might actually make an advanced guide to mentalism, where I go over what I consider to be advanced mentalism techniques. But before I go into that, let's just go over a couple of really basic things that are important to learn about mentalism. I do share that idea that Bob Cassidy had, which is that you shouldn't perform mentalism for your friends and family, really. You should strive to perform for complete strangers, because that will help you to develop your persona. That persona that you project when you perform mentalism. And there are many different personas you can take on. Some of the more simple ones that you've probably seen is like, you could be like the psychologist or the scientist, where you're the person that you understand human psychology, and that this is an experiment that you're doing with them. You may be that person that you want to be like a psychic or a mystic, that you can tap into that aura and energy about the person to be able to get a read on them. And this will really depend on your personality, what you decide. You may want to project a persona that you're the influencer, that you can influence their choices, or even be that person that's like the savant, that you've tapped into the higher levels of the brain. You've been able to train your brain to do things that no one else can do. So you can see that there's many different personas you can take on when you perform mentalism, and this will help it so that way your performances are more believable. Because if you perform mentalism well, your spectator will leave with the impression that you really could read their mind. Even if you tell them, what I showed you is just an illusion. If you tell them, I just showed you a simple trick, they will leave with that doubt in their mind. Maybe you really could influence them. Maybe you really knew what they were going to think before they thought of it. That's how powerful mentalism is. And when you first start out, I would urge you to focus on like 3 to 5 effects. Don't go more than that. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Perfect those effects so you can perform them flawlessly. And whatever opener you choose, my strongest advice is that the opener should be something personable about that person. And the reason is because people care about themselves most, obviously. And so any opener that's about them is going to be 100 times more powerful than anything else. But if you can't come up with something like that, then you may want to choose something that's very fast. And the reason is because if it's fast, then it will very quickly get their attention, and then you can perform something that's a little bit lengthier afterwards without any issues. Now, in terms of the props that you use, you can use whatever props you want. I'm going to be going over a few of them here on this video, but the props are not central to the performance. This is really important that you understand this, because contrary to magic, where the props are everything, the props are incidental in mentalism. They're just there. They don't matter. What really matters is the connection with the person. And that's why it's important that you choose props that look completely ordinary. So my strongest advice would be to stay away from those custom decks of playing cards that exist to do mentalism. They're a crutch. They exist because magicians want something that's self-working. They want something that does heavy lifting for them. That's why they exist. But they're a crutch. And if you rely on that, your spectators are not going to be half as amazed as if you were to perform without them. Why? Because they don't exist in nature. What I mean by that is that there's no way you can convince somebody, hey, this deck of cards that has all these movies written on them is something that I found, at the local drugstore. It's much more believable when you just take out a regular deck of playing cards, or even use their deck of playing cards, or any deck of playing cards that's there, because that's an item that's just laying around, and the item doesn't matter. What matters is your interaction with the person. So there's a lot of books on mentalism, and I don't want to inundate you with a list of mentalism books you may want to pick up, but I'm going to give you a couple of classic texts of mentalism that you definitely should pick up. And then I'm also going to give you a couple of modern classics of mentalism that I think you're really going to like a lot. So obviously the first book would be The 13 Steps to Mentalism. This really should be required reading, especially the first chapter more than anything else in this book, although the whole book is just full of good ideas of mentalism, as well as Animan's Practical Mental Effects. This is also should be required reading. Those two books alone, you're going to learn so much about mentalism, and you're going to find that there are so many modern mentalism products that are using the same techniques and the same principles that are in those books, but those are really good. I would also recommend you try to pick up Bob Cassidy's The Artful Mentalism of Bob Cassidy. Excellent reading, so much good advice in that book, as well as Max Maven's Color Series of Mentalism, or his book Prism, that I think you can get from Penguin Magic. So those are a couple of classic books of mentalism. I could give you so many more. I could give you books by Bruce Bernstein, other mentalists that are very well known, but I don't want to inundate you with too much. I think this is a good starting area. In terms of classic mentalism magazines, there's tons of them. There's everything from the Jinx magazine to Peter Warlock's Pentagram, right? The new Pentagram. Although I will tell you that there are other magazines that were put out that are chock full of mentalism, but that you wouldn't think so. Like the Pabular magazine, like Ebidem. This is chock full of mentalism, although it doesn't seem like it. So there's lots of places where you can learn mentalism. And in terms of, modern classics of mentalism, there's a couple of books I would recommend that you take a look at. One would be Michael Murray's A Piece of My Mind, which I think was put out about 10 years ago. This has become a modern classic of mentalism, as well as Joshua Quinn's Paralyze. Excellent little book on mentalism, and totally different from many other books out there. I would also recommend, if you can get your hands on Orion by Feed on Billick, which I did a complete review on my channel of both of those books, because not only are you going to learn a bunch of really good mentalism there, but you're going to learn the art of revealing information to your spectators, which I think that's the real value of Orion more than anything else, is learning how to really reveal information to your spectators in an entertaining and intriguing way. So we're going to start out with the first beginner core mentalism tech, and I'm going to actually do a demonstration of it for you guys to show you just how easy this is to use. And we're going to use Chat GPT. Hey Chat, you want to see a mentalism effect?
Absolutely. Hit me with it. I'm all ears and ready to be wowed, or at least very cleverly tricked. Let's dive right into what you got in mind.
All right, so I've got my business cards here, and if you were here, I would have you sign the one that I'm going to use, but since you're not here, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write something down. Okay, I've committed myself, and what I did was I wrote down a number from 1 to 100. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mentally send you that number, and I want you to allow some numbers to enter your mind, but eventually settle on one number, the one I'm mentally sending you. All right? Let me know when you got it.
All right. I love this kind of mind reading challenge, so I'm going to go ahead and let a few numbers float around in my head, and I'll pick the one that feels like it's got your mental signature on it. Give me just a second. Okay, I think I've got one in mind.
All right, what do you got? What's the number?
All right, no sugarcoating here. The number that popped into my head is 37. So let's see if my mental antenna were tuned in right.
That was really close, 37. But let me ask you something though. Did you think of a different number first before that came into your mind?
Oh, you're on to me. Honestly, yeah, there was a little moment where a different number kind of wandered through my head before 37 settled in.
What was that?
Well, since you want it straight up, the first number that kind of flashed by was 42, but it didn't quite stick.
42, that is crazy. So, you know, you didn't see this, right? But I picked up that pencil a second ago, and what I did was I wrote down one number here, right? And that number is 42. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, that is awesome. I love a good mentalism twist like that.
So here I'd be able to just hand it to them, and that would be the end of the effect right there. You can see that the routining of the effect is designed to make it look like you missed, but then you really predicted something that they didn't even reveal to you until almost like a second thought. Because the standard version of just the number written and then you reveal it is very, very linear. And I found that this was a lot stronger to pretend like that you missed or was close, and then you ask them if they actually thought of something else first, and that's really what you predict. And you guys can see that what I'm talking about here is the Swami or the boon. And this is probably one of the most underutilized mentalism tools that exist, even though I would argue that it's probably, if not the most powerful, one of the most powerful mentalism tools that exists in our toolbox. And I've asked the question, why is it that more mentalists don't use this? Because it's excellent for close-up. You could use it on stage, impresses everyone. You can make impossible predictions. And I think part of the reason is guilt from doing it right in front of the spectator. The other reason may be because it's not self-working and you may have to put in a tiny little bit of practice to learn how to use it. But you'll be able to predict anything you want from, think about this, you can predict numbers, obviously, birthdays, you can predict playing cards, you can predict their favorite color, you can predict names, you can predict, left or right, all kinds of stuff. If you're using a mentalist wallet that has an SUC feature like this Stealth Assassin, you can make a prediction, put the card in the wallet, be holding it, ask them a question, and then a second later you can open it up, take the card out, and show them that you predicted it ahead of time, which makes this such a powerful tool that you can use. And I think it's a beginner tool because it's actually really easy to use. And if you are curious about the choreography of the routine I just showed you, the actual mechanics of that effect that I just showed you belongs to Sean Waters, and you can read it in his book called Wanderer. And I've used that choreography now for a little less than 5 years. And what I really liked about it is that it looks very innocent when you are apparently retracing your steps that you're telling them. So a moment ago, I wrote down a number here, you didn't see what I wrote, did you? And they say no, and then you show it to them, and it's very shocking to the spectator. It blows away everybody, and it's super easy to perform, as you could see. So this is really the first beginner mentalism tech that I wanted to go over. And if there is interest, I may even review some of the writers that I've picked up over the years and give you guys my own experiences of them. But it's definitely something that you should check out, and I would recommend any writer to no writers. The next basic core mentalism tech I wanted to go over is the peak, and I'm only going to briefly touch on this because you probably already have more than one way of peaking information. And the reason is because the mentalism industry has released more products centered around peaking information than anything else. So you probably have a mentalism wallet that you use to peak information, or maybe you have an impression device, or maybe you use a business card peak, or a billet peak like Acidus Novus or Gnostic Oblique, or maybe you use a center tear, or maybe you use an envelope peak, or maybe you use your telephone with an app. But there are many different ways of peaking information. Unfortunately, we don't place enough emphasis on how that information is revealed to your spectator in an engaging and entertaining and intriguing way, because that's way more important than how you get the information. So I would urge you to focus on trying to come up with good routining of how you reveal the information to your spectators. And one good resource is the book set Orion that I pointed out in the beginning of this video, because Pheidon Bilek goes over some really interesting ways of making the revelation meaningful to the spectator and memorable, of course, which is why I think it's such a great resource. And my own tips to you guys is anytime you have a spectator write down any information that you're going to peak later, never try to justify why they're writing it down. When you tell them, write down the name of your childhood best friend, make sure I can't see it, do not try to justify why they're doing it. Just keep moving, because they will likely forget they ever even wrote it down. They're going to remember how you revealed the information to them, how you read their mind. They're not going to remember that they even wrote it down, especially if your routining is done well. Moving along to the next basic core mentalism tech I wanted to go over, and that is mentalism with playing cards. And the reason is because playing cards is an object that can be found in a lot of different places. It's innocent, and there are thousands of mentalism effects with playing cards. You can perform some very impressive mentalism, reading their mind, influencing their choices, and predicting what they're going to do using this prop. Now, I could recommend tons of good mentalism effects with playing cards, but I'm only going to recommend like 3 or 4 to you guys because I don't want to inundate you. And really, you don't really need to know that many. You only really need to know, a couple, because you don't want to perform too many of them in a row. Ideally, you want to do one, and that's it. And that will leave them wanting more, really. So I'm going to first show you guys the one mentalism effect of playing cards that I think I've done more than any other. And this is like Old Faithful, where the spectator has shuffled the deck. You take it back and you tell them, look, I'm going to look away and I want you to just say stop anywhere you want. They say stop. You say, look at that card. Try not to forget it. It may be a moment before you see it again. In fact, here, take the cards and give them a shuffle. And then you start to read their mind. And you're like, and you're like, oh, I'm sensing it's a red card. And it's 2 of hearts, So that simple peek, glimpse, reveal gets very strong reactions. So it's a really quick little thing that you could even use as an opener. It's served me well over the years. I think that you guys can use that as well. Another mentalism effect of playing cards I would recommend is Out of Sight, Out of Mind. And there's many versions of it. I would recommend the version I reviewed on my channel, which was Max Maven's version, which I think it was just called Out of Mind. And it was on his KFAB DVD set. I would recommend that version. It's beginner level, super easy to perform, very impressive. The next mentalism affected playing cards that I would recommend would be the Cardician's Dream, which is an Ed Marlowe effect that can be found in the Cardician. Although it was published in a couple of different places, it was also published, I think, by John Rockerbomber. And so, I mean, it was published in a couple of different places, but you can find it in the Cardician. But it was a variation of a Bob Hummer effect, which was called the Mind Reader's Dream, I think is what it was called. But the reason why it's so strong is because it's with any deck in use, shuffled deck. You would give it to the spectator, tell them to think of any playing card they want. And you'd say, I'm going to turn my back. And then you would have them deal some cards to the table based on the value of the card they're thinking of, and then the suit. And then you would have them put the rest of the deck on top, and then you'd have them cut the deck a couple of times. And then you would just kind of read their mind, and then you would just go through the deck and take out the card that they're thinking of and show it to them. So that's the basic effect. And what I really liked about the Ed Marlowe version is that it's completely impromptu with any deck in use, which I really like that a lot. It's beginner level. You could perform it really easily. I will also mention the variation by Joseph Barry, which, if I remember correctly, it was in Reverie, which was, oh God, what's it called? Something like Narrowed Thought or something. But the reason I mentioned the Joseph Barry effect was he had a really nice reason for why the spectator dealt the cards to the table based on their value and suit. His excuse was so that way if somebody, like if you're performing for more than one person, it's so that way the spectator could show their friend what they're thinking without saying it out loud while your back is turned. So I thought that was an excellent excuse to have them deal the cards down. And so that way it kind of hides why you're even having them deal the cards to the table. And if you are interested in the Joseph Barry effect, the nice thing about it is that there is some setup, so it's not like the Ed Marlowe version that's impromptu. The Joseph Barry effect, there is some setup, but you never touch the deck. Now think about that for a minute. You never touch the deck, and the only fishing that's involved is you need to just fish out the color of the card. That's it. That is it. Now just think about that for a moment. The spectator's thinking of a card that you don't know. You turn your back, they deal the cards to the table, right? And then they put the deck on top, and then literally you're able to know what they're thinking of, and you never touch the deck. That's crazy when you think about that. Beginner level, super easy to perform, impressive, blows away everyone, which is why I recommend it. And then the last effect that I'm going to recommend to you guys is one that if you're interested in it, you should send me an email. It's an effect that Fantini had published. I don't remember the name of it now offhand, but it's an ESP effect. And I wanted to recommend at least one ESP effect for those people that like to use ESP cards. It can be done also with just a regular deck of cards too, so it kind of goes both ways. But the original version, I didn't like it when I read it because it was very mechanical and it felt like rigid. So I actually took the effect and restructured it from ground up to make it something that felt fluid and organic. So if you are interested to learn it, you can send me an email and I'll send you the instructional video, which is my rehandling of the effect that makes it something that you're going to use, and it's very easy to perform. So I'll share that with you if you're interested. But if you want to know what the effect is, basically what you're doing is you're showing the spectator that you've got 5 ESP cards and only one is different, and then you mix them up and they're going to use their sense of ESP to tell you which card is the odd card. That's really what the effect is. And again, you don't need to use ESP cards, but it is nice that you can just use a regular deck of cards and just use like 4-spot cards in like an Ace of Hearts or a Queen of Hearts or something like that. So it is something that you'll be able to do anytime you want with any deck really, or your ESP cards. The next basic or core beginner mentalism tech I wanted to go over is what I call memory systems. And this is specifically Propless mentalism. Now, before you cringe, right, I want to explain this to you that I consider Propless mentalism to be absolute beginner level mentalism. And why? Because it's sleight of mind. So if you take the most basic anagram and you commit it to memory, where you know it like the back of your hand, then when you go to perform, it's autopilot. You don't have to think. The problem is that there are people that don't really put in the time to learn something, and then they go and try to perform it and they look stupid. That's the problem. You will probably hear people say that they don't like Propless mentalism, that it's too difficult, and those are people that don't perform Propless mentalism, okay? Because anagrams work really well, you know. There is a difference, though, when you tell somebody to think of their star sign, imagine how they would spell it, imagine sending you those letters. It's different when you say, there's an R. I'm sensing there's an R, and they say yes or no, and then you're like, and you're like lost in thought. That doesn't play well. It is different when you say to the spectator like this, I'm sensing there's an R, right? And an I, and there's not an A, is there? No, but there's an O at the end, right? Okay, yeah, okay, just picture this. When you're moving at that speed, it feels like you're just pulling the information out of their mind. And that is why if you want to learn mentalism, you want to perform good mentalism, this is absolutely essential to learn at least one or two pieces of Propless mentalism to use in your act, in your performance, because it feels like real mind reading. You're not using anything. You're pulling the information out of their mind. That's it. So there's a lot of Propless mentalism that I've gone over here on my channel, and I'm just going to recommend to you guys that you should go back and look at my videos and see, because there's some Propless mentalism that you might find more useful than others. There is an anagram generator that was put out by the Jerx, which you're probably familiar with his blog as well. But I will leave a link in the description below, because it's an excellent tool that you can use to generate your own anagram from, you know, whatever words that you want to use. Maybe you want to create a very simple anagram with just like 5 or 6 words, or maybe you want to create one that's more complicated. There's a couple of nice options there that I think you guys are going to like. But just to recommend a couple of pieces to you guys, I would recommend that you try to learn a star sign anagram, because that's a personal piece of information about the person. And then you can also try to even learn some of the characteristics of each star sign, so you can give them almost like a reading. And that almost touches on the next topic I was going to talk about. But that's definitely an excellent tool to try to learn and master. Besides that, there are several other Propless mentalism effects that I've gone over here on my channel, like Lexicon from Pheidon Billick in his book Orion, as well as the Ultimate Propless Peak. I also went over that on my channel. If you pick that up, there's some really nice stuff in that book, as well as my planetary effect that's in there that you can also learn. But there's so much good Propless mentalism out there that you can pick and choose what you want. But I would emphasize that you don't listen to negative people that tell you that Propless mentalism is like expert level mentalism and that you should just avoid it. That's not true at all. It's beginner level. Why? Because you can sit at home, you can learn it, you can practice it with ChatGPT, you can go over it again and again and again until you can do it without thinking. And then when you perform for your spectators, you can concentrate on your performance, on, you know, your presentation, because it's all autopilot. And so your spectators are going to be completely amazed, and you're just going to be like, oh, that was easy, because it's just like any other day for you. So the last beginner core mentalism tech I wanted to go over is cold reading. And even though a lot of people feel that this is advanced mentalism, I would argue that it's absolute beginner level. And why? Because the art of cold reading, that is, you know, giving educated guesses, reading body language to make it seem like you really know the person, have some psychic insight of them, this is something that you can learn slowly at your own pace at home, and it will just make all of your performances a lot more robust. So a good example is if you've ever watched Luke Germain perform mentalism, you will notice that he uses cold reading constantly in all of his performing. And the reason is because it makes that spectator feel like the mentalist really can see into them, really can see them as a person, that they're really reading them. And there's lots of different sources that you can use to learn cold reading. One that I mentioned to you guys is if you do learn a star sign anagram, you should try to learn a couple of characteristics from each star sign, so that way you can give a little mini reading as you are divining their star sign. So a good example of like what you could use for cold reading, just so you can see, and this is what people typically think of cold reading, is if you say to somebody like this as you're performing, you say, you know what, you seem like the kind of person that you sometimes doubt yourself, but if you're pushed, then you can become very decisive, am I right? And this is almost like a Barnum line. And people often think that cold reading is memorizing all of these lines. And it's not really memorizing these lines, it's more understanding them. Because as you learn more about cold reading, you will learn to incorporate these concepts into your performances. And then it's not that you've memorized the line, it's more like that it's in the back of your mind already. So it will just come out without you even trying. And again, it's something that you can learn very slowly at your own pace, and then you can just use it whenever you want. And even if it doesn't hit, it doesn't matter, because you only need one statement to hit for that person to really feel like you're really reading their mind. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So let me give you a couple of recommendations. The Classic Reading by Lee Earl is a book I liked on cold reading. I read it a long time ago now. There is Robert Nelson's The Art of Cold Reading, excellent book as well. And Joe Riding, his cold reading series, I really liked his advanced cold reading book. I thought it was really good too. So there's many different sources out there for you. And if you do pick up any works from those mentalists that use a lot of cold reading, you will even learn some of their cold reading because it's in their books as well. But I would urge you to focus on that because it's just going to make your performances that much more robust and just better overall. So that's what I wanted to go over with you guys in this beginner's guide to mentalism. I hope that there was something here that you found useful. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, just leave them for me here below. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. And I hope that you are performing mentalism and having a good time doing it. Anyway, I will see you on the next review. Thanks so much.